Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are, well, honestly, we're going to war.
Yeah.
And I'm not talking about boots on the ground or, tanks or some geopolitical skirmish you see on the news. I'm talking about a war for your mind, for your competence, and frankly, for your sanity.
Right. It's a completely different battlefield.
Exactly. If you are a man listening to this right now and you have ever felt like the modern world is rigged against you specifically because you are good at what you do, then you need to stop everything. Put your phone on Do Not Disturb and just listen.
A really bold opening, I know, but looking at the stack of research we have on the desk today, I mean, it is the only appropriate way to frame this. We are looking at a text that essentially functions as a manual for deprogramming yourself from what the author calls the cult of mediocrity.
It's a heavy read.
Very heavy,
Yeah.
but absolutely necessary.
We're diving into the deep end of the pool today, no doubt. But before we even unleash this beast, I have a job for you, the listener. You need to hit that like and subscribe button right now.
Yeah, please do.
I am dead serious. We are tackling topics today that the algorithm absolutely hates. We're talking about the kinds of things that get channels demonetized, suppressed, shadow banned, you name it. We need your help to spread this kind of analysis. So pause for a second, hit subscribe, and let's get into it.
Today, we are doing a deep dive into the ebook called Born Above Station, Nature's Mistake That Built Civilization by Conrad Riker.
And let me be clear, this isn't just a book review. This is a look at what Riker himself calls a war cry, a reclamation.
Right.
The premise is simple, but it's devastating. You have been told your whole life that you are too much. Too smart, too strong, too masculine, too direct. You've been told to tone it down, to read the room.
Be softer.
Yes, to be softer. And Riker is here to tell you that you are not the problem.
Riker argues that the very systems we trust, so we're talking corporate HR, academia, the media, he claims they've been captured by what he terms the feminine imperium in the cathedral. And he makes it very clear, we are just reporting his thesis here,
Yeah.
that their goal isn't equality. It's not fairness.
What is it then?
According to the book, it is the specific and targeted punishment of excellence.
If that sounds intense, well, it is. And I'm going to tell you right now, you need to go to Amazon Kindle or Google Playbooks immediately and buy Born Above Station.
Absolutely.
This deep dive is going to give you the highlights. We're going to break down the philosophy, but the book itself is the weapon you need. It's framed as an essential manual for understanding why you might feel like an alien in your own workplace.
And for those who want the raw, uncensored thoughts from the author, because, books still have to go through some filters, right?
Sure.
You should follow @Conrad and Riker on Substack.
Yeah.
That's where his real-time analysis happens.
Yeah.
And from what I've read, the guy doesn't pull a single punch.
Okay, let's unpack the core conflict here. Riker starts with this disclaimer that this is edutainment, but honestly, reading it, it feels deadly serious.
Very serious.
He addresses the learner, that's you, the guy listening who actually reads books, who tries to improve things, who wants to build. He says you aren't suffering from imposter syndrome.
And this is a crucial distinction to make right at the start. I mean, we are constantly told that if we feel out of place or we feel anxious in a corporate setting, it's our internal insecurity.
Right.
We need therapy. We need to, quote, do the work.
Right.
Riker flips that entirely. He posits that you feel out of place because you are a competent person in a system designed to reward mediocrity. You aren't crazy. He argues you are the victim of a system that views your competence as a literal threat.
That is a massive shift in perspective. Instead of, I need therapy because I feel like a fraud, it's I feel like a fraud because this environment is fraudulent.
Exactly.
It legitimizes this instinct that a lot of men have, which is, hey, I'm doing the work, I'm getting the results, why am I the one in trouble?
Precisely. Riker argues that the feminine imperium, which is his term for the emotional, consensus-driven bureaucracy that runs modern life, punishes men who refuse to apologize for their nature. It punishes clarity. It punishes logic. It punishes the very things that actually build civilization.
Let's get into the evidence, because Riker definitely brings the receipts. He doesn't just philosophize. He looks at the data. Section 1 is all about this war on excellence and the trap of credentialism. He drops a bomb right in chapter 1 about Google.
Oh, the 2013 Google data? This is
Yeah.
fascinating. This should have changed everything in the corporate world, but it was basically buried. Google, which is arguably the most data-driven company on Earth, their whole business model is organizing information, right?
Right.
They decided to crunch years of performance metrics, They wanted to know what actually predicts success at the company.
And everyone assumes it's the Harvard degree, right? The
Right.
4.0 GPA, the perfect SAT score. This is the golden ticket we're sold from age 5.
And everyone is wrong. Google found that GPAs, SAT scores, and elite degrees were among the weakest predictors of employee success. In many cases, they were statistically useless.
Useless. So you spend 200 grand on the Ivy League education, you incur all that debt, you jump through all those hoops, and the data says it means nothing for actually doing the job.
According to their own internal data, yes. What mattered, they found, was grit, problem solving, and the ability to navigate ambiguity. It was the raw builder mindset. But here is the disconnect Riker points out, and this is where he says the conspiracy of mediocrity comes in. Despite this data, HR departments still demand the credentials. They still filter for the degree. Why?
That is the million-dollar question. If they know it doesn't predict success, why do they mandate it?
Because, according to the book, the system isn't interested in the raw output of excellence. It's interested in compliance. A degree proves you can follow orders for 4 years. It proves you can submit to authority. It proves you are socialized in the way they want. Excellence is actually dangerous to them because excellent people tend to be independent thinkers.
This leads to what Riker calls the overeducated idiot. I love this concept. It's the idea that we have produced an elite class that is technically credentialed. They have the paper on the wall, but practically useless.
He draws a really sharp contrast here between someone like Elon Musk and the typical MBA. Musk is results-driven. He sleeps on the factory floor. He cares about physics and engineering reality. Does the rocket fly or does it blow up? That's all that matters.
Yeah.
The typical MBA, on the other hand, is process-driven. They care about stakeholder management and deliverables and optics.
There is a story in the book that perfectly illustrates this, and I want to walk through it because I think every man listening has been in this room at some point. Riker talks about a boardroom meeting where a Harvard MBA is arguing that they can't launch a product without a 6-month risk review.
Oh, this story is incredible.
Right, he's got the charts, the PowerPoint, the buzzwords, he is performing business, and then there's this self-taught coder in the back of the room.
The coder raises his hand and says, I've already built it. It's in the cloud. We can deploy it in 10 minutes.
And the MBA laughs, not because it's funny, but because the sheer competence is offensive to his process. The coder just rendered the MBA's entire 6-month plan obsolete in 10 seconds.
And Riker notes that the coder was fired shortly after for, quote, cultural misalignment, while the MBA is probably still there holding meetings about meetings. And this ties right back into the imposter syndrome lie.
How so?
Well, that coder might walk away thinking, maybe I just don't fit in. Maybe I'm not professional enough. Riker says, no, you were gaslit. Imposter syndrome, in this context, is a psychological weapon used to make competent men feel insecure about their natural superiority in a dysfunctional system.
It's the Lake Wobegon effect weaponized. If everyone is special, then no one is. But when someone is actually special, when they are high performing, the mediocre majority experiences that excellence as an insult.
Exactly. It's the tall poppy syndrome. As you stand up too straight, you get cut down. Riker argues that in a healthy society, excellence lifts everyone up. Everyone looks at the genius and says, thank you for building that. But in the society Riker describes, excellence is a reminder of everyone else's inadequacy. So the high performer must be destroyed or ostracized.
This brings us to how they destroyed the ability to even recognize excellence in the first place. This is section 2 of the deep dive, looking at the death of the trivium. Now, I hadn't heard this term used this way before, but it makes so much sense when you break it down.
The trivium is the classical foundation of education, going all the way back to the Greeks and Romans. It consists of 3 parts: grammar, logic, and rhetoric. Grammar is the structure of language, learning how to describe reality accurately. Logic is the mechanics of thought, learning how to detect truth from falsehood, how to spot a contradiction. And rhetoric is the art of persuasion, learning how to communicate that truth effectively.
And Riker says these were removed on purpose.
He argues it was a deliberate move to create emotional reactors rather than thinkers. Look at the modern curriculum. He claims they removed grammar and logic, and they focus almost entirely on rhetoric, persuasion, feelings, activism.
Makes sense.
If you remove grammar, people can't define their terms. If you remove logic, they can't spot a fallacy. But if you teach them rhetoric, they can be easily manipulated by emotion.
He cites some terrifying data from the University of Chicago on this. This is one of those stats that just stops you in your tracks.
Yes. In 2022, researchers tested incoming humanities students, and remember this is the University of Chicago, an elite institution. 68% of these students couldn't identify a passive voice construction. That is basic grammar. It's 6th grade stuff.
Unbelievable.
But, and here's the kicker, 92% knew the term microaggression without prompting.
So they can't deconstruct a sentence, they don't know the mechanics of their own language, but they can deconstruct your social privilege and identify a microaggression instantly.
That is the shift he's talking about. They are being trained to detect heresy, not to detect illogical arguments. They are trained to sniff out political noncompliance. Riker calls this the satanic agenda in academia.
That's a really heavy word. Satanic. He doesn't mean it in the literal horror movie sense, does he?
No, he uses it specifically to mean inversion. In theology, the satanic is the inversion of the divine order. Riker argues that the modern university, specifically what he calls the satanic Ivy League, has inverted all values. Truth is now treated as a lie, strength is now viewed as a sin, merit is called oppression, and competence is labeled toxic.
And it's not just a vibe he's describing. He brings up the Pew Research, finding that 68% of humanities faculty identify as leftist. It's a total monoculture.
It creates an echo chamber where reality is optional. This is why we see the replacement of the classics according to the book. Shakespeare, Homer, Newton, they are being removed. Not because they aren't brilliant, but because they are white males and therefore problematic. Riker mentions the decolonizing knowledge movement, which argues that things like the scientific method, linear time, or objectivity are actually tools of colonial oppression.
Which is insane to think about. I mean, gravity doesn't care about your colonial history, but they take it seriously. Riker recounts the Sokol Squared hoax to prove just how intellectually bankrupt these places are. I love this story.
This is one of the funniest and most tragic episodes in modern academia. 3 scholars, James Lindsay, Helen Pluckrose, and Peter Boghossian, they decided to test the system. They wrote fake papers with absolutely absurd premises to see if journals would publish them, provided they used the right woke language.
Right.
One of them argued that the human phallus is a conceptual construct responsible for climate change and colonization. They used all the right buzzwords: intersectionality, discursive violence, all of it.
And it got published.
Not just published, celebrated. Peer-reviewed journals accepted it. They thought it was brilliant scholarship. This proves Riker's point. These fields are not based on evidence or logic, which goes back to the death of the trivium. They are based on ideological conformity. If you say the right things, if you signal the right virtue, it doesn't matter if your content is literal gibberish.
So we have a generation of people coming out of these universities who can't think, who can't use logic, but who are absolute experts in grievance. And where do they go? They don't become plumbers or electricians. They go straight into HR.
Exactly. This is section 3, looking at the feminine imperium and corporate capture. This is where the rubber meets the road for most men listening to this deep dive. You graduate, you get a job, and suddenly you are facing an HR department that operates like a political commissar.
Riker calls HR the enforcer. He talks about how they weaponize emotional intelligence, or EQ. Now, we always hear EQ is a good thing, right?
We usually think of EQ as empathy or social awareness, but Riker argues it has been completely twisted. He says it's now used to punish masculine traits. Traits like directness, stoicism, risk-taking, and competitiveness are labeled toxic. If you are direct, you are called abrasive. If you are stoic, you are unavailable.
He brings up the IBM Culture Champions program. This is chilling. It sounds like something straight out of Easter Me.
It really does. This program effectively trains staff to monitor employees, specifically men, for toxic signs. And the signs included things like avoiding small talk or being too quiet.
Being too quiet. So if you are a guy who just wants to put his head down, code, build the product, and get the job done, you are now a threat. You are suspicious.
Because you aren't participating in the emotional economy. You are withholding validation. The feminine imperium, as Riker defines it, demands constant emotional affirmation. He points out a massive double standard here. Women are encouraged to cry in the office. It's seen as authentic and empowering.
Yeah.
But if a man is stoic, he is intimidating. If a man cries, he is weak. But if he is just quiet and competent, he is hostile. It's a complete trap.
It's a lose-lose-lose scenario for a man in that environment. Riker also talks about the collapse of male alliances. Chapter 12 deals heavily with the destruction of male-only spaces.
This is a vital point in the book. Historically, men have always formed groups to bond, to mentor each other, and to build. Fraternal orders, the Boy Scouts, private clubs, these were the engines of civil society. Riker argues these spaces have been systematically targeted and destroyed.
He tells the story of the Ohio Masons to illustrate this.
Yes, a centuries-old group. One baseless complaint from a woman who wasn't even a member, who had no legal standing, and the Grand Lodge shut down all private male meetings. The fear of litigation, The fear of being called exclusionary overrides the fundamental right of men to freely associate.
And then there's the wrench talk incident at Boeing. This one really got to me because it's just so petty.
It's petty, but it's highly symbolic. Two engineers at Boeing had a podcast. It was internal, just for fun. They talked about tools, mechanics. They called it wrench talk, just guys talking shop.
Yeah.
They were fired.
Fired. Literally fired for talking about wrenches.
They were fired because the podcast was deemed exclusionary. It was implicitly a male space, not because they banned women, but because the content naturally appealed to men. Therefore, it was seen as a threat to the inclusive culture. Riker's point here is that isolating men makes them easier to control.
Divide and conquer.
Exactly. If you can't bond with other men, if you can't have locker room talk or shop talk, you have no support network. You are just an atomized individual facing a massive corporate bureaucracy alone.
That is terrifying. It's not just about diversity policies, it's about breaking the capacity for men to organize. If you are alone, you are weak.
Correct. And Riker asserts that is the explicit goal.
Which leads us to the new currency of this realm, which is victimhood. Section 4 covers the weaponization of guilt and victimhood. Riker says victimhood is now vastly more valuable than competence.
In a true meritocracy, you rise by being useful. In the feminine imperium, you rise by having a grievance. He cites the diversity trauma grant at Google as a prime example.
I couldn't believe this one when I read it. A Google employee got paid $15,000 because he felt overlooked in diversity reports.
Yes, he claimed his status as a cisgender white male caused him existential stress because he wasn't being celebrated in the DEI emails. Yep. And they actually paid him. Riker uses this to prove that the system is so terrified of emotional discomfort that it will pay literal protection money to anyone who claims trauma. It's a racket.
And then you have the flip side of that with James Damore at Google. Damore didn't claim trauma. He didn't whine. He wrote a memo citing evolutionary psychology and hard data to suggest, hey, maybe there are biological reasons for gender disparities in tech.
And he was fired immediately. This is the pivotal moment Riker identifies in modern corporate history. Damore tried to use logic going back to the trivium and data to have a rational conversation. The response was pure religion of feelings. He was treated as a heretic. Data is heresy if it contradicts the mandated narrative that men and women are exactly the same in all preferences.
You cannot use facts to argue against a religion.
Exactly.
Riker calls this weaponized guilt. Men are constantly told they are oppressors, that they are greedy, that they are toxic. We hear it every single day. But Riker pulls up the Bureau of Labor Statistics data to counter this.
Right. The data shows men donate 38% more to charity than women. Men are the primary benefactors of almost every major philanthropic effort. Yet the cultural narrative is that men are selfish hoarders of power. Riker argues this guilt is manufactured specifically to keep men complying.
It's a control mechanism.
Yes. If you feel guilty for your success, you will apologize for it. You will step aside. You will give up your spot to someone less qualified simply because you feel you owe them.
And the ultimate manifestation of this is the Crying Conference.
Oh, the World Economic Forum event.
Yeah. They actually encouraged executives to shed tears on stage as a sign of authentic leadership.
Riker contrasts this WEF push with the University of Haifa study showing that tears are actually a biological weapon. The study shows they physically reduce decision-making capacity in observers. When you cry, you biologically manipulate the room. You force people to drop their logic and comfort you.
Wow.
Riker argues this isn't leadership. It's institutionalized emotional blackmail. It is the exact opposite of the stoic leader who instills confidence during a crisis.
It's manipulation, plain and simple. Okay, we have to go deeper now. We have to take the red pill. Section 5 digs into the biological reality. And this is where Riker brings in the big guns. Arthur Schopenhauer.
Chapter 18 is heavy. This is where Riker stops being polite entirely. He revives Schopenhauer's philosophy regarding the will. Schopenhauer argued that women are evolutionarily wired for what Riker calls deception and resource extraction.
This is the part of the book that will absolutely get you canceled at a dinner party, but we're going there because it's central to his thesis. Riker argues that hypergamy, which is the female instinct to marry up and secure resources, is the actual driving force of history, not love, not equality.
He argues that the modern system, the cathedral, is just hypergamy writ large. It's the state acting as the ultimate husband. Think about it. The state extracts resources from high-performing men through massive taxation and transfers those resources to women and the mediocre to provide security. He talks about emotional inflation. Society rewards female hysteria with attention and money, while punishing male logic with isolation and taxes.
And the ultimate victims of this setup are fathers. The betrayal of the fathers in chapter 11. This is honestly the most painful part of the book to read.
The divorce statistics he presents are brutal. A 2021 Harvard study showed that high-earning men are significantly more likely to be falsely accused of abuse during divorce proceedings. Why? Because the accusations work. They are pure leverage. It's like dropping a tactical nuke in the family courtroom.
Riker talks about the legal phrase, best interests of the child. It sounds nice on paper, but he says it's a weapon.
It allows the state to override parental rights based on entirely subjective feelings. The story of the father who lost custody for teaching his kids calculus is the prime example he uses.
Wait, run that back for the listeners, because this sounds fake, but it's documented. He lost custody for teaching math.
Yes. The court ruled that his insistence on teaching them calculus was undue pressure and showed a lack of emotional vulnerability. He was trying to give them hard skills for the future. He was trying to make them competent. But the court wanted him to give them emotional validation. Because he focused on competence over feelings, the state removed him from his children's lives. Riker says that is the war on excellence in a nutshell.
That is absolutely enraging. A man tries to equip his children for a harsh reality, and the state calls it abuse. This is exactly why Riker says the West is declining. Which brings us to Section 6, the decline and rebirth of the West.
It connects right back to that religion of feelings. Riker gives the real-world example of a major bridge project that was scrapped. Not because of engineering failures, not because of budget overruns, but because activists claim straight lines trigger trauma.
Straight lines trigger trauma. We are doomed. We are actually doomed.
It sounds like a parody, but it's real. Riker also cites the Oberlin course, where students are taught that math is racist and that objectivity itself is a tool of white supremacy. Think about the physical implications of this.
It's civilization ending.
Exactly. If you cannot build a bridge because straight lines are traumatic, and you cannot do math because it's racist, your civilization collapses. The physical infrastructure literally fails. You cannot maintain a power grid or a sewage system on feelings and trauma narratives.
So what is the solution? Riker doesn't just complain for 300 pages. He offers a path forward. Chapter 19 is called The Path of the Sovereign Man.
The solution he offers is not to fight the system from within. He says the system is completely rigged, so don't bother. The solution is solitude as protocol. Riker advises high-performing men to intentionally embrace solitude. Reject the emotional economy entirely. Stop looking for validation from women, from HR departments, from society at large. Stop trying to explain your logic to people who inherently hate you.
He talks about an exit strategy.
Yes. Practical steps, crypto, dual citizenship, homesteading. He tells the story of a guy named James in Georgia. James completely disconnected. He uses crypto, he lives off the grid, he has removed his resources from the state's control as much as legally possible. Riker calls this becoming sovereign. You starve the beast by refusing to feed it your competence and your money.
And he also points to a geopolitical countermodel, Poland and Hungary.
This is chapter 20. Riker sees Eastern Europe as the rebirth. These nations are actively rejecting the religion of feelings. He mentions the fatherhood houses in Poland.
What exactly are those? I hadn't heard of them before this book.
They are essentially grassroots initiatives to mentor young boys in trades, martial arts, and classical philosophy. It's basically the anti-daycare. They are teaching boys to be strong men, not emotional reactors. They are bringing back the trivium.
And they are rejecting gender ideology across the board.
Explicitly rejecting it. Poland and Hungary have stuck to biological reality. Riker notes that this correlates with higher social stability, higher fertility rates, and a firm rejection of the cultural suicide we see happening in the West. He argues the future belongs to nations that refuse to indulge in delusion.
This book is just, it's a lot. It is a merciless dismantling of modern lies.
It really is. And Riker's final verdict is that this book is not for the weak. It is not for the ideologically infected. It is a strict roadmap for the man who wants to survive the inevitable collapse of the feminine imperium.
Which brings us to the most important part of this deep dive. You need to get this book right now. I'm not asking, I'm telling you. Go to Amazon Kindle. Go to Google Playbooks. Search for Born Above Station, Nature's Mistake That Built Civilization by Conrad Riker. Buy it, read it, highlight it.
And leave a review. Riker mentions in the epilogue that algorithmic suppression is very real. Leaving a 5-star review is a tactical act. It helps fight the censorship on these platforms. It helps other men find this manual.
And you need to follow the author. He is at Conrad Riker on Substack. That is where he posts the thoughts that are just too hot even for the published book. Follow him on Twitter and YouTube as well. Get plugged into the source directly.
The knowledge in this book is the armor you need right now. It explains why you feel the way you do in society, and it tells you exactly how to escape the trap.
Exactly. And finally, make sure you like and subscribe to The Deep Dive. We are taking massive risks bringing you this unvarnished content, so support us by subscribing to the channel.
I'll leave you with Riker's final provocation from the book. It's a line that really sticks with you. He writes, "The future belongs to those who refuse to kneel."
Don't kneel. Get the book. We'll see you next time.
Stay sovereign.